The compound walls exploded inward with a sound like God's own hammer striking stone. Sarah Mitchell pressed herself against the bullet-scarred wall, her hands slick with blood that wasn't hers. Beside her, Bishop, 200 pounds of Navy SEAL muscle, gasped shallow breaths through punctured lungs. The chest seal she'd slapped over his wound glistened in the moonlight, and every breath he took sounded like torn paper. 15 Taliban fighters were closing in from the north. Sarah could hear their boots crunching across broken glass, their voices calling coordinates in Pashto. Her M4A1 carbine felt heavy in her hands. 8 rounds left, maybe 9 if she'd miscounted in the chaos. The radio crackled against her ear. "Doc." Reaper's voice carried the flat tone of a man who'd already written her obituary. "You're on your own. Can't risk the team for 2. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger guard. Through the gap in the wall, she could see the Black Hawk lifting off from the LZ, its rotors throwing dust devils across the Afghan night. The SEALs were leaving, all 6 of them climbing into that helicopter while she bled and fought and kept Bishop's heart beating with nothing but pressure and prayer. "Roger that, sir," she whispered into the radio. Her voice didn't shake. Her father had taught her that much at least. The helicopter's lights became stars, then nothing. Bishop's hand found her wrist. "Doc, how'd we get here?" Sarah looked at the blood on her hands, at the approaching Taliban, at the empty sky where her team had been. Good question, she thought. How did a 27-year-old combat medic from Amarillo, Texas, end up abandoned in an Afghan compound with 15 enemy fighters closing in and a dying SEAL in her lap? The answer was simple, really. 72 hours ago, she'd thought she was just a medic. Forward Operating Base Helmand smelled like dust and diesel, and the particular kind of sweat that came from men who hadn't seen home in 7 months. Sarah sat on her cot in the medical tent, methodically checking her aid bag for the 3rd time that evening. Quick clot combat gauze, check. Morphine auto-injectors, check. Chest seals, tourniquets, Israeli bandages, all accounted for, all within arm's reach. The bag had belonged to her father once, Master Sergeant James Mitchell, United States Army Rangers. The canvas was worn soft in places where his hands had gripped it, during Desert Storm, during operations whose names were still classified 20 years later. Sarah ran her thumb over the faded blood type markings, O positive, same as hers, and felt the familiar hollow ache behind her ribs. He died when she was 17. Cancer, the Army said. Agent Orange exposure from training exercises, they claimed. Just bad luck. Nothing to be done. She'd believe them then. A metal footlocker sat beneath her cot, locked with a combination only she knew. Inside, wrapped in an oilcloth that smelled of gun solvent and memory, was her father's Remington 700. The rifle he'd carried through Kuwait and Iraq, the one he'd used to make a shot at 1,100 yards that had saved his entire platoon. The one he'd taught her to shoot with, back when she was too small to hold it without the bipod. "A good shot can save more lives than medicine, Sar," he'd told her, squinting through the scope while she watched from beside him on the ridge overlooking their ranch. "But a good medic with a good shot, that's a guardian angel." She was thinking about that, about guardian angels and impossible shots, when Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison walked into the medical tent without knocking. Everyone called him Reaper, 6'2", weathered like old boot leather, with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. He'd been running SEAL operations in Afghanistan since 2008, back when Sarah was still in nursing school, still thinking she'd spend her life in a hospital, somewhere safe and clean and boring. "Mitchell," he didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You're with us tomorrow. Hostage rescue, 20 clicks north. Civilian journalist, American, grabbed by Taliban 3 days ago. Intel says they're moving him at dawn. We hit the compound at 0300. Sarah stood. At 5'3", she barely came up to his chest. "Yes, sir. I'll have my gear ready." Reaper looked at her the way a man might look at a hangnail. Minor annoyance, easy to ignore. Stay out of the way. We move fast. We hit hard. You keep up or you get left. Clear? Crystal, sir. And Mitchell? He was already turning to leave. Don't waste meds on lost causes. We go in, get the package, get out. Anyone who can't walk gets a morphine shot and a prayer. We don't have time for heroes. The tent flap closed behind him. Sarah looked down at her aid bag, at the supplies that could mean the difference between a soldier going home or going to Arlington. Don't waste meds on lost causes. She wondered what her father would have said to that. Probably something about how every man was worth saving, how you didn't leave anyone behind, how the measure of a soldier wasn't how fast they moved, but how many of their brothers came home. But her father was dead, buried under a stone that lied about how he died. And Reaper was alive, about to lead a mission that might get them all killed. She started packing her gear. The briefing room was thick with testosterone and tension. 6 SEALs sat around a folding table covered in satellite photos and topographical maps. Sarah stood in the corner, quiet, trying to make herself small, invisible, the way women learn to be in spaces where they weren't wanted. Target compound is here. Reaper tapped a grainy photo. Stone walls, 2 stories, typical Taliban construction. Estimate 10 to 15 enemy combatants. Hostage believed to be held in the northwest room, 2nd floor. Bishop Chen leaned forward, studying the image through cold eyes. The team's designated marksman, 6 years with the teams, holder of the unit's record for longest confirmed kill at 1,400 yards. Sarah had stitched up his hand 2 weeks ago when he'd caught it on concertina wire. He'd barely flinched while she worked. What about Overwatch? Bishop asked. That ridgeline would give us good coverage, 800 yards out. You're on it, Reaper confirmed. Hawk breaches front door. Tank on the 240. Ghost and Preacher clear rooms. I'm on command. Doc. He glanced at Sarah like he'd forgotten she was there. Doc stays with the vehicles until we call for casualties. Tank Rodriguez, the team's machine gunner, grunted. No offense, Doc, but why bring her at all? This is direct action, not a field hospital. Sarah kept her face neutral. Because last month, 3 of you came back with sucking chest wounds, and 1 of you would have died if I hadn't known how to decompress a tension pneumothorax with a 14-gauge needle. Tank had the grace to look away. She comes, Reaper said. Standard protocol. But you stay back, Mitchell. These boys have been running together for 2 years. Last thing we need is someone who can't keep up, slowing us down. Sarah wanted to tell him that she graduated Ranger School. Well, the first week before they'd reassigned her to medical. Wanted to tell him that she could dead hang for 3 minutes. Could run 5 miles in 40 minutes with a full ruck. Could field strip an M4 in 23 seconds blindfolded. Wanted to tell him that her father had trained Delta Force operators who'd learned to shoot from watching him work. Instead, she said, yes, sir, because that's what you did when you were 5'3" and female, and trying to prove you belonged in a world built for men who thought strength only came in one size. They left FOB Helmand at midnight, 2 Humvees rolling through the Afghan darkness with lights off, following roads that were more suggestion than fact. Sarah sat in the back of the second vehicle, aid bag on her lap, listening to the SEALs joke about the operation. $10 says Hawk blows the breaching charge early again, Ghost Williams said. Point man, 24 years old, Alabama accent thick enough to spread on toast. 20 says the hostage pisses himself when we come through the door, Tank added. They always do. 50 says Doc throws up first time she hears real gunfire, someone muttered. Sarah didn't respond. Just checked her M4 for the 4th time, felt the weight of the 30-round magazine, ran through the manual of arms in her head. Safe, semi, auto, breath control, sight alignment, trigger squeeze between heartbeats, the way her father had taught her. The Humvee hit a pothole and her head cracked against the metal ceiling. Easy, Doc, Bishop said from beside her. Save the head injury for the Taliban. I'm fine. Yeah, he looked at her with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. You military family? Sarah hesitated. My father was Army, Rangers, Desert Storm. No shit. What was his name? James Mitchell, Master Sergeant. Bishop's expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. The Mitchell? Made that shot in Kuwait, saved his whole platoon. That's him. Heard stories about that. 1,100 yards, sandstorm, moving target. Instructors still use it as an example of impossible shots that somehow land. Bishop studied her face in the darkness. He teach you to shoot? He taught me everything. Then why are you a medic? Because women couldn't be rangers, Sarah thought. Because when she'd shown up at Fort Benning with her father's letter of recommendation and scores that would have guaranteed any male recruit a slot in selection, they'd smiled and thanked her and suggested she might be happier in medical. Because the Army had evolved, sure, but not that much, not enough. Because someone has to keep you knuckleheads alive, she said instead. Bishop almost smiled. Fair enough. The Humvees stopped 3 clicks from the target. They'd walk the rest of the way, minimize noise and detection. Standard operating procedure for direct action raids. Sarah watched the SEALs gear up with the efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times. Plate carriers, helmets, night vision, weapons checks. Every movement was rehearsed, economical, deadly. Hawk Daniels, the breacher, carried 20 pounds of C4 and det cord like it weighed nothing. Tank had the M249 SAW across his shoulders, 200 rounds of linked ammunition draped over his vest like metallic player beads. Ghost moved like his call sign suggested, there and not there, checking his suppressed M4 with hands that never seemed to stop. And Bishop had an M110 semi-automatic sniper rifle, match-grade ammunition, a loopholed scope that cost more than Sarah's first car. He was checking windage adjustments, running calculations in his head, the way Sarah had watched her father do 1,000 times. Mitchell, Reaper appeared beside her. Last chance. You sure you can do this? Sarah looked at him, really looked, saw the doubt in his eyes, the certainty that she'd fail, the resignation that he'd probably have to carry her out. Saw her father in his place, young and strong, and telling her that she could do anything if she refused to quit. I'm sure, sir. Then stay on my 6. Don't do anything stupid. And remember, don't waste the meds. They moved out into the darkness. The compound sat in a shallow valley between 2 ridges, exactly where the intel said it would be. Stone walls 8 feet high, wooden gate reinforced with sheet metal, 2 stories of mud brick construction that had probably stood for a century. Solar panels on the roof. Taliban fighters live better than most Afghan civilians. Satellite dish pointing skyward, Russian-made generator humming in the courtyard. Through her PBS-14 night vision, Sarah saw the world in green-gray gradients. 2 sentries walked the walls, AK-47s slung casual across their backs. A third smoked a cigarette by the gate, the ember glowing like a tiny sun through the optics. Bishop was already gone, ghosting up the eastern ridge to his overwatch position 800 yards out. The rest of the team stacked up outside the gate, Hawk first with the breaching charge, then Tank with the SAW, Ghost and Preacher behind him, Reaper calling the shots. Sarah stayed 20 meters back, crouched behind a boulder, aid bag ready. Her M4 felt solid in her hands. Safety off, finger on the trigger guard, not the trigger. Breath control. Her father's voice in her head. Fear is just your body getting ready to do something hard, Sarah. Don't fight it. Use it. Reaper's hand came up. 5 fingers. 4, 3, 2, 1. The breaching charge blew the gate off its hinges with a crack that split the Afghan night in half. The SEALs flowed through the opening like water finding cracks in stone. Muzzle flashes lit up the courtyard, controlled pairs, double taps, the distinctive sound of suppressed weapons coughing death into the darkness. Sarah watched through her optics as the sentries dropped, as Taliban fighters spilled from the building, as the whole careful plan went kinetic in the space between heartbeats. Bishop's rifle cracked from the ridge. Once, twice, three times. Each shot followed a fraction of a second later by the wet impact of 7.62 millimeter rounds finding flesh. He was working methodically, clearing the courtyard, picking off targets with the precision of a surgeon. Then everything went wrong. A Taliban fighter appeared on the second-floor balcony with an RPG-7 on his shoulder. Sarah saw it at the same instant Reaper did. Saw the man kneeling, aiming, preparing to turn the courtyard into a kill zone. "Bishop!" Reaper's voice on the radio. "Balcony, north side, RPG!" Bishop's rifle swung. The shot came half a second too late. The rocket-propelled grenade streaked across the courtyard and detonated against the stone wall 15 feet from where Bishop had been providing overwatch. The explosion lit up the night, and through her night vision, useless now, overloaded by the flash, Sarah saw Bishop's position disappear in smoke and falling stone. "Bishop is down!" Ghost's voice. "Repeat, Bishop is down!" Sarah was moving before she made the conscious decision. Left the boulder, sprinted across the open ground, aid bag bouncing against her hip. Bullets cracked overhead. AK fire, undisciplined, spraying lead in every direction. Something tugged at her sleeve, and she knew without looking that a round had come within inches of her arm. Didn't matter. Bishop was down. The ridgeline was steep, loose scree that turned each step into a gamble. Sarah climbed anyway, using hands and knees, her rifle slung across her back. 50 meters, 70. She could hear Reaper shouting on the radio, but couldn't make out the words over the hammering of her own heartbeat. Bishop lay in a crater of broken stone, blood pooling beneath his left shoulder. The RPG hadn't hit him directly. If it had, there wouldn't be enough left to save. But the blast wave had thrown him 10 feet, and the shrapnel had done what shrapnel always did. Found soft tissue, opened arteries. Started the clock on how long a man could bleed before he stopped being a man and became just meat. Sarah dropped beside him, hands already moving, tore open his plate carrier, found the entry wound high on the shoulder, exit wound in back, through and through, thank God. But the bleeding was arterial, pulsing in time with his fading heartbeat. "Doc!" Bishop's eyes were glassy with shock. "Leave me. Get back to team." "Shut up." Sarah's hands worked automatically. Quick clot combat gauze, packing the wound, pressing hard enough to make Bishop gasp. "You're going to be fine. Just breathe." "They're pulling out." Heard. "Reaper on radio. Missions compromised." Sarah pressed harder, felt the gauze soaking through with blood that wouldn't stop. Behind her, down in the compound, gunfire had reached a crescendo. She could hear tanks SAW hammering away, Hawk shouting coordinates, the sharp crack of grenades detonating in enclosed spaces. Her radio crackled. "All units fall back. Repeat, fall back to rally point. Mission abort." Sarah looked at Bishop, at the blood still coming despite everything she was doing. Looked down at the compound where the SEALs were already moving toward the extraction point. Looked at the empty ridge stretching away in all directions. "Doc," Reaper's voice. "Bishop's done. Get yourself back here, now." She could leave him, pack up her aid bag, slide back down the ridge, make it to the extraction point before the Taliban realized there were stragglers. Bishop was unconscious now, wouldn't even know she'd left. Wouldn't feel anything when they found him. Wouldn't blame her. Don't waste meds on lost causes. Sarah looked at her hands, covered in Bishop's blood. Looked at the rifle slung across her back, her father's training echoing in her bones. Looked at the compound where her team was leaving without her. "Negative, sir," she said into the radio. "I'm staying with Bishop." Silence. Long enough that she thought maybe the radio had died. Then Reaper's voice, flat and final as a coffin lid closing. "Doc, Bishop, if you can move, move. Otherwise..." A pause. Godspeed. The radio went dead. Sarah heard the Black Hawk before she saw it. The distinctive whump, whump, whump of rotors beating the air. The turbine whine of engines spooling up. She turned just in time to see the helicopter lift off from the LZ 200 meters away. The SEALs climbing aboard, leaving her and Bishop alone on a ridge above a compound full of Taliban fighters who would be coming any second now. Bishop stirred. Told you to leave. And I told you to shut up. Sarah pulled a tourniquet from her aid bag, started wrapping it around Bishop's shoulder. We're both getting out of here. How? Good question. Sarah looked at the compound below, counted 15 Taliban fighters in the courtyard, some tending to their wounded, others already organizing a search party. She looked at her M4, 30-round magazine, one in the chamber, 31 rounds total. She looked at Bishop's M110 sniper rifle, lying 5 feet away where the blast had thrown it. The scope was cracked, but the weapon itself looked intact. She reached for it, pulled it close, checked the magazine. 20 rounds of match-grade 7.62 millimeter ammunition. Her father's voice. Breathe. Squeeze between heartbeats. Doc. Bishop was looking at her with something like understanding dawning in his eyes. Your father, Master Sergeant Mitchell, the shot in Kuwait. Yeah. You know how to use that rifle? Sarah looked at the M110, then at the Taliban fighters in the courtyard below. 800 meters, steep downward angle, night wind from the east, maybe 8 miles per hour. Cold temperature affecting powder burn, factors her father had taught her to calculate instinctively, the way some people calculated tips or counted change. I know how to use it, she said. Then use it, because they're coming. He was right. 4 Taliban fighters were starting up the ridge, AK-47s at the ready, moving carefully through the rocks. They'd be here in 5 minutes, maybe less. Sarah pulled the M110 to her shoulder, felt the weight of it, the balance, the way the stock fitted against her cheek like it had been made for her. Through the cracked scope, she could see the Taliban fighters moving up the ridge, could see the ones in the courtyard below, organizing, preparing. She thought about Reaper's voice on the radio. You're on your own. She thought about her father teaching her to shoot, telling her that every shot mattered, that every life was worth saving, that a guardian angel with a rifle could change the course of a battle. She thought about Bishop bleeding beside her, about the SEALs who'd left them behind, about the stone in Arlington Cemetery that lied about how her father died. Then she stopped thinking. The first Taliban fighter was 90 meters away when Sarah squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the muzzle flash invisible through the suppressor. The fighter dropped without a sound, a round through the center of his chest. His companions dove for cover. Second shot, the fighter on the left trying to circle around. 85 meters, headshot. He fell backward like someone had cut his strings. Third shot, the fighter with the radio calling for backup. 95 meters, through the shoulder because she wanted him to suffer, wanted him to think about why he was dying on this ridge in the middle of nowhere. He went down screaming. Fourth shot, the last fighter running back down the ridge, 100 meters and moving fast. Sarah led him by 3 feet, squeezed the trigger, watched him tumble head over heels down the scree. 4 shots, 4 kills, 7 seconds from first to last. Bishop was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. What the fuck, Doc? Sarah didn't answer. She was already scanning for new targets, already calculating angles and distances and wind speeds, already becoming what her father had trained her to be, back when she was too young to understand that some lessons were written in blood. In the compound below, the Taliban fighters were panicking. They just watched 4 of their own die in the space between breaths, killed by shots they never heard coming from a position they couldn't locate. Sarah watched through the scope as they scattered, looking for cover, shouting at each other. One of them, older, clearly in charge, started organizing a defense, pointing at the ridge, at the rocks, directing his men to covering positions. Sarah put the crosshairs on his chest. Breathe. Squeeze. The commander dropped. The rest broke and ran. Bishop! Sarah kept her eye on the scope. Can you move? Maybe, if you help me up. Then we're moving. Right now, before they regroup. She helped him to his feet, one arm around his waist, his weight pressing down on her. Bishop was 6 inches taller and 80 pounds heavier, but Sarah had carried wounded soldiers before, had learned to find the leverage points, to use her legs instead of her back, to keep moving no matter how much it hurt. They started down the ridge, slow, careful, Bishop's boots dragging through the scree. Behind them, Sarah could hear the Taliban regrouping, shouting, preparing to follow. She didn't look back, just kept moving, one step at a time, Bishop's blood soaking into her uniform. They made it 100 meters before the Taliban found their courage. Gunfire erupted from the compound. Wild, undisciplined AK fire that kicked up dust 10 feet to their left. Sarah pushed Bishop down behind a boulder, raised the M110, started returning fire. Methodical, economical, every shot placed exactly where it needed to be. Her radio crackled. "Doc, this is Angel 6. A new voice. Not Reaper. Someone from the FOB. Black Hawk is inbound to your position. ETA 5 minutes. Can you hold?" Sarah looked at Bishop, unconscious now from blood loss. Looked at the M110. 8 rounds left. Looked at the Taliban fighters advancing up the ridge, at least a dozen of them now, emboldened by numbers. "Roger, Angel 6, I can hold." She could hold. She would hold. Because 5'3" or not, combat medic or not, woman or not, she was James Mitchell's daughter. And James Mitchell's daughter didn't leave anyone behind. Didn't quit. Didn't run. The Taliban came up the ridge in a rush, thinking they could overwhelm her with speed and numbers. Sarah proved them wrong with 6 shots placed so precisely that the survivors thought there must be an entire platoon up here. Thought they'd walked into an ambush instead of finding one small woman with her father's training and her own stubborn refusal to die. The Black Hawk came in low and fast, door gunners spraying suppressive fire across the compound. Sarah grabbed Bishop under the arms, dragged him toward the landing zone, her legs burning, her lungs screaming for air. 20 meters, 10, 5. Strong hands reached down from the helicopter, pulled Bishop up, pulled Sarah up. The bird lifted off with rounds sparking off its armor plating, climbing hard into the Afghan night, while Sarah collapsed onto the deck, gasping, bleeding from half a dozen places she didn't remember getting hit. Across the cargo bay, she saw Reaper, saw the shame in his eyes, the guilt, the knowledge of what he'd done, saw him looking at her like she was something he'd never seen before, something he didn't understand. "How many," he asked, had to shout over the rotors. "How many what, sir? How many did you kill?" Sarah looked at her hands, still covered in Bishop's blood, thought about the 4 fighters on the ridge, the commander in the compound, the 6 who'd charged their position. Thought about her father telling her that every life was precious, that taking one should never be easy. 11, sir, give or take. Reaper stared at her. The other SEALs stared at her. Bishop, barely conscious on a stretcher, managed something that might have been a smile. Mitchell. Reaper's voice was different now, quieter. "Your father, Master Sergeant James Mitchell. Rangers." "Yes, sir. He was MACVSOG, wasn't he? In the Gulf War. Black operations. The kind they don't talk about." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. "He was a Ranger, sir. That's what his records say." "Yeah," Reaper looked away. "That's what they say." The Black Hawk banked hard toward FOB Hellman, carrying them all home. But Sarah kept staring at Reaper, kept thinking about the way he'd said black operations, the kind they don't talk about. Kept thinking about her father's death, about cancer in Agent Orange, and explanations that had never quite added up. Kept thinking about the rifle in her hands and the blood on her uniform, and the 11 lives she'd ended to save one. Kept thinking that maybe, just maybe, she didn't know her father's story as well as she thought she did. The helicopter flew on through the darkness, and Sarah Mitchell sat in the cargo bay with Bishop's blood drying on her hands, wondering what other lies she'd been told, wondering what truths she was about to discover. The medical tent at FOB Hellman smelled like antiseptic and lies. Sarah sat on the edge of a cot while a corpsman she didn't know cleaned the shrapnel wounds on her left arm. Small cuts mostly, nothing that would leave permanent scars on the outside. The ones inside were a different story. Bishop was 3/10 over, stabilized and waiting for the medevac flight to Landstuhl. The corpsman said he'd make it, said Sarah's quick work with the quick clot had saved his life, said she should be proud. Sarah just stared at her hands. She'd scrubbed them twice, but could still see Bishop's blood in the creases of her palms, under her fingernails, in the whorls of her fingerprints. Could still feel the rifle's kick against her shoulder. Could still see the Taliban fighters dropping, one after another, like dominoes falling in slow motion. 11 men, give or take. The tent flap open. Reaper stood silhouetted against the Afghan sun, dust motes swirling around him like ash from a funeral pyre. Mitchell, with me, the corpsman looked up. Sir, she needs rest. She's been... Now, Doc. Sarah stood, followed him out into the afternoon heat, across the compound to a Quonset hut that served as the command center. Inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees, thanks to an air conditioning unit that probably cost more than her annual salary. Maps covered the walls, satellite photos, target assessments, the infrastructure of war, reduced to images and overlays in digital readouts. A man in civilian clothes stood studying a monitor. Khakis, polo shirt, tactical boots. No rank insignia, but the kind of posture that said he didn't need one. Late 40s, salt and pepper hair, eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. Lieutenant Mitchell, the man said without turning around. I'm Rodriguez, CIA Station Chief for Helmand Province. Sarah said nothing, waited. Rodriguez turned, studied her the way a jeweler might study a diamond, looking for flaws and finding none. 11 confirmed kills, 4 on the ridge, 1 commander in the compound courtyard, 6 more during the extraction. All precision shots, 800 meters or better, most of them in low-light conditions, with a weapon you'd never fired before. He paused. Your father teach you that? My father's dead. I know. Gulf War syndrome, the records say. Chemical exposure during training exercises. Rodriguez picked up a file folder, tapped it against his palm. Funny thing about those records, they're sealed. Above top secret, the kind of seal that makes people ask questions they shouldn't ask. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. What's your point, sir? My point is that Master Sergeant James Mitchell wasn't just a ranger. He ran black operations for MACV-SOG during the tail end of the Cold War. Nicaragua, El Salvador, places that officially don't exist in our operational history. Then Desert Storm happened and he got reassigned. Deep penetration reconnaissance. The kind of work where you go in alone and come out with intelligence that saves thousands of lives. Rodriguez opened the folder. The kind of work that gets you exposed to things the government would prefer stayed buried. Reaper was watching Sarah's face. She kept it neutral, empty, the way her father had taught her to play poker back when she was 12 and thought the most dangerous thing in the world was losing her allowance. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because 3 days ago we intercepted communications from a Taliban cell operating in Kunar province. Cell leader is a man named Ahmad Khalil, former Mujahideen, fought with us against the Soviets in the 80s. Smart, educated, speaks perfect English, turned against us after 9/11 when we came back to Afghanistan. Rodriguez pulled a photograph from the folder. He's been responsible for 17 IED attacks, 6 ambushes, and the deaths of 43 coalition personnel in the last 8 months. The photograph showed a man in his 60s, lean and weathered, with a gray beard and eyes that burned with the kind of conviction that started wars. Sarah had seen eyes like that before. On her father sometimes when he thought no one was watching. When the nightmares came and he'd sit on the porch cleaning his rifle at 3 in the morning, staring at nothing. What does this have to do with my father? Rodriguez pulled out a second photograph. This one was older, grainy, shot from distance with a telephoto lens. Two men standing in a desert somewhere, weapons slung across their backs, examining something on the ground between them. One of the men was younger, harder, but unmistakably Ahmad Khalil. The other wore U.S. Army fatigues with no unit insignia and looked exactly like the photograph Sarah had of her father at age 30. This was taken in Kuwait, February 1991, 2 weeks before the ground war started. Your father and Khalil were working together, intelligence gathering on Iraqi chemical weapons storage facilities. The room felt too small suddenly, too hot despite the air conditioning. Sarah looked at the photograph, at her father standing beside a man who would grow up to kill American soldiers, and felt something crack inside her chest. That doesn't mean anything, she said. We worked with lots of local assets during Desert Storm. True, but 3 days ago during that communications intercept, Khalil said something interesting. He said, and I quote, "The girl with the rifle, the one who killed my men on the ridge. I know that shooting. I've seen it before." Mitchell's daughter. Rodriguez closed the folder. "He knows who you are, Lieutenant, and he wants to meet you." The silence stretched out like wire pulled too tight. Reaper shifted his weight. "You think it's a trap?" "Of course it's a trap, but it's also an opportunity. Khalil has been untouchable for 8 months. No pattern to his movements, no predictable behavior, perfect operational security. Now he's offering to negotiate. Says he has information about your father's death, Mitchell. Says the cancer story is bullshit. Says he wants to talk to you, face to face, before he disappears into Pakistan." Sarah found her voice. "When?" 72 hours. Location to be determined. He'll send coordinates 6 hours before the meeting. Rodriguez leaned against the desk. "I want to put a team together. Small, fast, flexible. Extract whatever intel we can from Khalil, then take him down. Reaper's team, augmented with CIA tactical operators." "And me?" Sarah asked. "You're the bait." Reaper stepped forward. "Negative. Mitchell's a medic, not an operator. She got lucky on that ridge, but this is different. This is..." "She killed 11 Taliban fighters with a borrowed weapon she'd never fired before," Rodriguez interrupted. "In the dark, under fire, while keeping a critically wounded SEAL alive. That's not luck, Commander. That's skill. The kind of skill that doesn't come from basic combat lifesaver training." He looked at Sarah. "The kind that gets passed down from father to daughter." Sarah thought about the Remington 700 in her footlocker, about the hours she'd spent on the ranch, her father's voice in her ear, learning to read the wind and calculate elevation and become one with the rifle until shooting wasn't something you did, but something you were. Thought about the lie on his headstone and the truth that might be waiting in Kunar province. "I'm in," she said. Reaper's jaw clenched. "Mitchell, you don't have to." "I'm in, sir. Whatever it takes." Rodriguez nodded. "Good. You have 48 hours to prepare. Reaper, get her qualified on every weapon system she might need. I want her ready for anything." He turned back to his monitor, dismissing them. "And Mitchell, your father was a hell of an operator. Let's make sure you live long enough to find out why he died." Outside, the Afghan sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of blood and copper. Sarah walked beside Reaper across the compound, neither of them speaking until they reached the armory. "You don't have to do this," Reaper said finally. His voice was different from before, quieter, almost gentle. "Khalil is playing you. Whatever he knows about your father, it's bait to get you into a kill zone." "I know. And you're going anyway, wouldn't you? If someone told you they knew the truth about how your father died? If they said everything you'd been told was a lie?" Reaper looked at her for a long moment. Then he unlocked the armory door. Come on, if you're going to get yourself killed, you might as well know how to shoot properly first. The armory smelled like gun oil and copper solvent. Racks of weapons lined the walls. M4s, M16s, M100s, even a Barrett M82, 50 caliber that looked like it could punch holes through God himself. Sarah ran her fingers along the Barrett's receiver, felt the weight of it, the potential violence contained in engineered steel. Forget it, Reaper said. That's a crew-served weapon. Takes 2 people to deploy effectively, and you'd need... My father, qualified expert on the M107 in 2003, taught me the basics when I was 19. Never got to fire it for real, but I know the manual of arms. Reaper stared at her. Your father was a piece of work, wasn't he? He was a soldier, same as you. No, Mitchell, he was something else entirely. Reaper pulled her father's Remington 700 from a locked cabinet. Sarah hadn't even known he'd retrieved it from her footlocker. This rifle, it's been modified. Custom trigger, upgraded barrel, modifications that aren't standard issue. This is a sniper rifle built by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Sarah took the rifle, felt the familiar weight of it, the balance, the way her hands knew exactly where to grip without thinking. He built it himself, spent 2 years getting every detail perfect. Said a rifle was like a marriage. You had to know it better than you knew yourself. Smart man, paranoid, but smart. Reaper pulled out a range bag filled with ammunition. Okay, Mitchell, you want to play operator? Let's see if you can back up what you did on that ridge. Range opens in 10 minutes. You're going to shoot until your shoulder's bruised and your hands are shaking and you can't remember your own name. Then you're going to shoot some more. Yes, sir. And Mitchell, stop calling me sir. My name's Jake. We're going to be trusting each other with our lives in 48 hours. Might as well get comfortable. The range was empty except for the 2 of them, and the Afghan night settling over the mountains like a shroud. Sarah set up at the 800-yard line, her father's Remington 700 solid against her shoulder, the scope's crosshairs steady on a target that looked impossibly small in the distance. Winds 8 miles per hour from the east, Reaper said. He was spotting for her through a high-powered scope, watching the target, calculating corrections. Temperatures dropping, powder burn will be affected. Elevation at this altitude means the round will carry farther, but drop faster. Show me you can make the math work. Sarah breathed, felt her heartbeat slow, felt the world narrow down to just her and the rifle and the target waiting 800 yards away. Felt her father's voice in her head. Breathe, squeeze between heartbeats. She squeezed. The rifle kicked. The round flew. 800 yards away, the target sprouted a hole exactly where she'd aimed. Center mass, where the heart would be if the target were human. Again, Reaper said. She shot again and again and again. 5 rounds, 5 hits, all within a 3-inch group at 800 yards. The kind of shooting that most trained snipers couldn't achieve on their best day. Jesus Christ, Reaper muttered. Bishop told me you were good, but this is... He trailed off, looked at her through the scope. Your father, he didn't just teach you to shoot, did he? He trained you, really trained you, like you were going to war. He said I might need it someday. Said the world was dangerous and getting worse. Said a woman needed to know how to protect herself. This isn't self-defense shooting, Mitchell. This is operator-level precision. This is the kind of shooting that takes years to develop. Thousands of rounds, perfect fundamentals. Reaper set down his scope. Your father knew. Somehow he knew you'd end up here, doing this. Sarah looked at the rifle in her hands. He died when I was 17. Lung cancer, they said. But he never smoked. Never drank. Ran 5 miles every morning until the day he couldn't get out of bed. They said it was chemicals from training exercises, but he was never exposed during training. The only time he would have been exposed was on operations, Reaper finished. Operations that officially never happened. He was quiet for a moment. My platoon sergeant in Iraq, guy named Torres, he served with your father in '91, said Mitchell was the best shooter he'd ever seen, but also the most paranoid. Always watching his back, always checking his weapon. Torres thought he was just hyper-vigilant from too many deployments. Now I'm wondering if he knew something we didn't. Like what? Like maybe the people who got him killed weren't Taliban. Reaper stood. Come on, we've got 48 hours to get you ready, and I'm not wasting any of it. You're going to learn everything. Close quarters battle, room clearing, hand-to-hand, advanced first aid, comms procedures. If Khalil's meeting is a trap, you need to be able to fight your way out. They trained through the night. Sarah learned to clear rooms with the smooth efficiency of SEAL operators, to use her size as an advantage in close quarters, to transition from rifle to sidearm to knife without thinking. Learned radio protocols and emergency procedures and 100 other skills that wouldn't save her life, but might buy her enough seconds for someone else to save it. By dawn, she could barely lift her arms. Her shoulder was purple from rifle recoil. Her hands shook with exhaustion. But she could put 10 rounds through the same hole at 500 yards, could clear a room in 8 seconds flat, could field strip and reassemble an M4 in complete darkness. You'll do, Reaper said. He looked as exhausted as she felt. Get some sleep. Mission brief is at 1400 hours. Bishop's being evacuated to Landstuhl in 3 hours. You should say goodbye. Sarah found Bishop in the med tent, conscious now, color returning to his face. He tried to smile when he saw her, but it came out more like a grimace. Doc, heard you're going after Khalil. Intel says he knew my father. I need to know what happened. What if you don't like the answer? Sarah sat on the edge of his cot. Then at least I'll know the truth. Bishop was quiet for a moment. My brother, David, he was Delta Force, died in Kunar province 8 months ago. IED attack. Intel said it was bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time. But after he died, my mom got a letter. Anonymous. Said David had discovered something about weapons sales to insurgents, and that's why he was killed. He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. I joined the teams to find out what really happened, to finish what he started. Haven't found anything yet except more questions. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just promise me something. Whatever you find out about your father, whatever truth Khalil has, don't let it eat you alive. The truth is supposed to set you free, but sometimes it just makes you a prisoner of a different kind. Sarah squeezed his hand. Get well, Bishop. The teams need you. The teams need you too, Doc. Don't get yourself killed trying to prove something. The mission brief at 1400 hours was short and brutal. Rodriguez laid out the plan with the efficiency of a man who'd done this 100 times. Khalil had sent coordinates, a village in Kunar province, abandoned since a Taliban massacre 3 years ago. Perfect place for an ambush. We go in fast, extract Mitchell and whatever intel Khalil provides, then call in air support to level the place, Rodriguez said. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Anyone who isn't Mitchell or Khalil is a target. Ghost raised his hand. What if Mitchell's already dead when we arrive? Then we kill everyone and go home. The team assembled at dusk. 6 SEALs, 4 CIA tactical operators, Sarah in the middle with her father's Remington 700, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. Reaper pulled her aside before they loaded into the Blackhawks. Last chance to back out, he said. No shame in it. This is above your pay grade. My father didn't raise me to back out. Your father's dead, Mitchell. Maybe he was wrong. Sarah looked at him, really looked, saw the guilt still there, the shame of leaving her on that ridge, the knowledge that he'd made a call that should have gotten her killed and somehow hadn't. Saw something else too. Respect, maybe, or fear of what she was becoming. Maybe he was, she said, but I'm going anyway. The Blackhawks lifted off into the Afghan twilight, carrying them toward Kunar province and whatever truth was waiting there. Sarah sat in the cargo bay, checking her weapons for the 10th time, trying not to think about the fact that in 3 hours, she'd be face to face with a man who'd known her father 30 years ago. A man who might hold the answers to questions she'd been asking since she was 17 years old. The helicopter banked hard over a ridgeline, and Sarah saw the village below. Stone buildings scattered across a valley floor, walls pocked with bullet holes, everything abandoned and silent and wrong. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody talked about it afterward. 2 minutes, the pilot's voice in her headset. Sarah's hands were steady as she checked her rifle one final time. Her father's voice in her head, clear as if he were sitting beside her. When you don't know what you're walking into, Sarah, make sure you can shoot your way back out. 1 minute. The Black Hawk descended toward a clearing 50 meters from the village. Sarah could see figures moving between the buildings, could see the distinctive outline of AK-47s, the tactical vests that marked these men as more than just farmers with rifles, professional fighters, the kind who knew what they were doing. 30 seconds, get ready. Reaper looked at her across the cargo bay, mouthed 2 words, stay close. The helicopter touched down, and Sarah stepped out into the Afghan night, into the valley where her father had worked 30 years ago, into the place where lies came home to die, and truth wore the face of an old enemy. Khalil was waiting in the center of the village, standing in what had once been the town square. Older than his photographs, leaner, with a kind of stillness that came from absolute confidence or absolute resignation. Hard to tell which. Mitchell's daughter, he said in perfect English. You look like him. Same eyes, same way of standing, like you're ready to shoot or run at any moment. He smiled. He taught you well. Sarah kept her rifle low but ready. You said you knew how my father died. I did. I was there. Not in person, but close enough. Close enough to watch it happen. Close enough to do nothing to stop it. Khalil gestured at the buildings around them. Your father and I worked together once, brothers in arms, fighting the same enemy. Then the war ended and new wars began, and suddenly we were on opposite sides. Funny how that works. Get to the point. The point, young Mitchell, is that your father didn't die from chemical exposure. He died because he discovered something he shouldn't have discovered. Something about American weapons being sold to Saddam Hussein, even while you were preparing to invade. Chemical weapons components, artillery shells, things that would make your government look very bad if anyone found out. Khalil pulled out a satellite phone. He reported it, went through proper channels, thought his superiors would handle it. Sarah felt ice spreading through her veins. What happened? What always happens when someone threatens powerful men? They made him disappear. Not immediately, that would have raised questions, but slowly. A diagnosis of cancer, treatments that didn't work, a quiet death that looked natural to everyone except those who knew what to look for. Khalil's eyes were sad. I tried to warn him, sent messages through back channels, but he didn't believe me, thought his own country would protect him. He was wrong. You're lying. Am I? Then tell me, why are his service records sealed? Why does a simple ranger sergeant have above top secret classifications on his file? Why did he spend 2 years running black operations that officially never happened? Khalil held up the satellite phone. This phone has encrypted files, photos, documents, communications between American officers and Iraqi weapons dealers. Your father collected them all, hid them away. Insurance, he called it. Insurance that got him killed anyway. His name is Richard Vance. He was a colonel in 1991. Now he's a general. Fort Bragg, your father's commanding officer. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd heard it before. General Vance was a legend. 3 combat tours, Silver Star, Distinguished Service Cross. The kind of officer they put on recruiting posters. "You're lying," she said again, but her voice sounded hollow even to herself. "Am I? Check the phone. The evidence is there. And when you've seen it, when you know the truth, ask yourself, how far will General Vance go to keep his secrets buried? What will he do to the daughter of the man who tried to expose him?" "Doc," Reaper's voice was urgent now. "We need to move. Right now. I've got 50+ hostiles converging on our position." Sarah looked at Khalil. "Why? Why tell me this? What do you want?" "Justice. Same as you. Your father tried to stop a conspiracy that got thousands killed. Iraqis, Americans, doesn't matter. War is war, and death is death. But the men responsible should answer for what they've done." Khalil stepped back. "I'm dying. Cancer, how ironic. Same disease that supposedly killed your father. I have maybe 6 months. So I'm giving you what I couldn't give him, a chance to finish what he started." Gunfire erupted from the perimeter, not the disciplined fire of professional soldiers, but wild, panicked shooting. The CIA operators were engaging targets, their suppressed weapons coughing into the night. "Ambush!" Ghost's voice on the radio. "Multiple hostiles, south and east perimeters. They're everywhere." Sarah grabbed Khalil's arm. "Call them off! Call off your men!" He looked at her with something like pity. "They're not my men, they're Vance's. Contractors. He knew you were coming, knew about this meeting. That's why I said it's a trap. But not for you. For me. Vance wants that phone destroyed, and both of us dead." An explosion tore through the western edge of the village. RPG followed by the stutter of heavy machine gun fire. Sarah saw one of the CIA operators go down, saw tanks M249 SAW light up the night with return fire. Reaper grabbed her shoulder. "Mitchell, we're leaving, right now." "I need to know the truth." "You're going to be dead if we don't move." Reaper was pulling her toward the extraction point, but Sarah wrenched free, turned back to Khalil. The old man was smiling. "Now you understand. The truth doesn't set you free, young Mitchell. It just shows you how deep the prison really goes." He pulled out an old revolver, Russian-made, probably older than Sarah. "I won't be captured, won't give them the satisfaction. But you live. You take that phone, you finish what your father started." "Khalil, wait!" He raised the revolver, not toward Sarah, toward himself. Sarah's training took over. She knocked the gun aside, the shot going wild into the night. "Don't waste lives," she shouted. "Not even your own." Khalil looked at her with surprise. Just like him, truly. Then his eyes went wide and he stumbled backward. Sarah saw the blood spreading across his chest before she heard the shot. Saw him falling, saw his lips moving, saw him trying to say something. She caught him as he dropped, lowered him to the ground, her hands already reaching for medical supplies that wouldn't matter because the shot had been too perfect, too precise. A sniper shot. From the south, where the SEALs weren't. "Sniper!" Sarah screamed into her radio. "Khalil's hit! South Ridge!" She was working on Khalil even as rounds kicked up dust around them, packing the wound, applying pressure, doing everything right and knowing it was all pointless because the bullet had shredded his heart, and no amount of medicine could fix that. "The phone!" Khalil gasped. Blood bubbled on his lips. "Take it. The truth is in there. Your father, he died for it. Don't let it be for nothing." His eyes went empty. His breathing stopped, and Sarah Mitchell knelt in the dust of an Afghan village, holding a dead enemy who'd been trying to help her, while American contractors tried to kill them both. "Doc!" Reaper was beside her, pulling her up. "He's gone. We need to move." Sarah grabbed the satellite phone, stuffed it into her vest, let Reaper drag her toward the extraction point where the Black Hawk was already spinning up, taking fire from 3 directions. They ran through chaos, through smoke and tracers and the screams of wounded men. Tank was laying down suppressive fire with the SAW, brass casings raining around him like golden rain. Ghost and Hawk were moving wounded toward the helicopter. The CIA operators were falling back by teams, covering each other, professional and efficient even as they died. Sarah ran, clutched the phone against her chest, and wondered what truth was worth this much blood. They made it to the helicopter with rounds sparking off its armor. Made it inside with 3 wounded and 1 dead, and the knowledge that everything they'd thought they knew was wrong. Made it into the air with an RPG streaking past so close, Sarah felt the heat of its exhaust. Made it away, into the Afghan night, carrying secrets that men had killed to protect and others had died to reveal. Reaper sat across from her in the cargo bay, blood on his uniform, rage in his eyes. Who were they? Who the hell were those contractors? Sarah looked at the satellite phone in her hands, thought about her father, thought about Khalil dying in the dust, thought about General Vance at Fort Bragg, probably getting a phone call right now about how the operation had failed, how the evidence had survived, how James Mitchell's daughter had just become a problem that needed solving. They were us, she said quietly. They were the people we trust to keep us safe, and they just tried to kill us all. The Black Hawk flew on through the darkness, carrying them back to FOB Helmand, back to the illusion of safety, back to a war that was suddenly more complicated than anyone wanted to admit. And Sarah Mitchell sat in the cargo bay with her father's rifle and a dead man's phone, knowing that the hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. The phone buzzed in Sarah's hands 3 hours after they landed at FOB Helmand. She was alone in her tent, staring at the encrypted device Khalil had died to give her, trying to decide whether to open it or throw it in the nearest burn pit and pretend the last 72 hours had never happened. The rational part of her brain, the part that had gotten her through Ranger School and combat medic training and 100 other situations where being smart mattered more than being brave, said throw it away. Said some truths weren't worth dying for. The rest of her, the part that sounded like her father's voice, said, open it. She opened it. The screen came to life with a password prompt. Sarah stared at it, mind racing. What would Khalil have used? What would her father have told him? Then she remembered something her father used to say when she asked about his time overseas, about the operations he couldn't talk about. Some secrets keep you alive, Sarah. Others keep you honest. She typed, honest. The phone unlocked. 3 folders, photos, documents, audio files. Sarah opened the photos first and immediately wished she hadn't. Her father was in the first image, younger but unmistakable, standing beside an Iraqi bunker with Colonel Richard Vance. Both men were smiling. Behind them, stacked in neat rows, were artillery shells marked with symbols Sarah recognized from her chemical warfare training. Mustard gas, sarin, VX nerve agent, chemical weapons that Iraq wasn't supposed to have, that America had supposedly never sold them, that officially didn't exist. The next photo showed paperwork, sales receipts, shipping manifests, all with official U.S. military letterhead, all authorized by Colonel Vance. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through more images. Her father's face appeared again, this time without the smile. He was photographing the evidence, building a case, documenting a conspiracy that went all the way to the Pentagon. The last photo was dated March 3rd, 1991. Her father standing beside Khalil, both men looking grim. On the back of a notepad in the photo, barely visible, her father had written, "If you're reading this, I'm dead. Vance knows. Insurance copies hidden. Trust no one." Sarah opened the audio files. Her father's voice filled the tent, older than she remembered, tired, but unmistakably him. "This is Master Sergeant James Mitchell, U.S. Army Rangers, recording this on November 12, 2008. I'm making this statement because I believe my life is in danger. In 1991, I discovered that Colonel Richard Vance was involved in illegal weapons sales to Iraq. I reported this through proper channels. 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with lung cancer. The doctors said it was from chemical exposure during training, but I was never exposed during training. The only time I handled chemical weapons was in Kuwait, photographing evidence against Vance. A pause. Sarah heard her father's labored breathing, the wheeze of damaged lungs. I've been treated for 18 months. The treatments aren't working. I'm getting worse, not better. My doctors say it's aggressive, unusual. I think I'm being poisoned, slowly, carefully, by people who want me dead but need it to look natural. Another pause. Longer this time. Sarah, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to fight it, tried to protect you, but some enemies you can't see coming, some wars you can't win. The evidence is out there, hidden in places only Khalil knows. Don't trust the army. Don't trust anyone with rank. Trust yourself. Trust your training. And remember, a guardian angel with a rifle can change the world if she's willing to pull the trigger. The recording ended. Sarah sat in the darkness, tears streaming down her face, rage building in her chest like pressure behind a dam. Her father hadn't died from bad luck or chemical exposure or cancer. He'd been murdered, slowly, methodically, by the same government he'd served for 20 years. And General Richard Vance had given the order. The tent flap opened. Reaper stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn light, his face carved from stone. You listened to it, he said, not a question. You knew. Sarah's voice was flat. That's why you said black operations. That's why you weren't surprised when Rodriguez told me about my father. I suspected, didn't know for sure until tonight. Reaper stepped inside, closed the flap behind him. Torres, my old platoon sergeant, he told me a story once. Said in '91 he was part of a security detail for a classified operation. Said he saw Master Sergeant Mitchell photographing Iraqi bunkers, taking samples, building documentation. Said a week later, Mitchell was reassigned stateside, and everyone was ordered to forget what they'd seen. Torres thought it was just OPSEC, standard classification procedure. But it wasn't. No, it was a cover-up. And when I put together that you were Mitchell's daughter, that you'd been raised by a man who trained like he was preparing you for war, I started asking questions, started digging into records I shouldn't have accessed. That's when the walls came up. His file is sealed above top secret. The operations he ran don't exist in any database. It's like someone tried to erase him from history. Sarah looked at the phone. Vance tried to kill us tonight. Sent contractors to make sure Khalil and I both died before this evidence could come out. I know, Rodriguez is in lockdown. 3 of his operators are dead. Vance is claiming it was a Taliban ambush, that we walked into a trap. Official story is we got lucky to escape. And the truth? The truth is that a 4-star general just committed treason and murder to protect a 30-year-old conspiracy. The truth is that we're all dead if he figures out you have that phone. Reaper sat down on the edge of her cot. Rodriguez wants to take this to the Inspector General. Start an official investigation. I told him he's insane. Vance has friends in every branch of the military. He's untouchable. Then what do? Reaper looked at her for a long moment. We finish what your father started. We get this evidence stateside. We put it in the hands of someone who can't be bought or intimidated. And then we disappear until Vance is in handcuffs. He'll never let us leave Afghanistan alive. Probably not. That's why we don't tell anyone we're leaving. Reaper pulled out a folded map. There's a CIA black site in Kabul. Secure communications. Direct line to Langley. We get there. We upload everything to servers Vance can't touch. We make enough copies that killing us becomes pointless. How far? 300 kilometers, across some of the worst territory in Afghanistan. Roads are mined, checkpoints are compromised. Taliban controls half the route. Reaper smiled without humor. Should be fun. Sarah looked at the phone. At her father's Remington 700 leaning against the footlocker. At the future she'd thought she had, a career as a combat medic, a clean service record, maybe teaching at Fort Sam Houston when she got tired of deployments. That future was dead now, killed the same way her father had been killed, by men in uniforms who'd forgotten what honor meant. "When do we leave?" she asked. 30 minutes, pack light, weapons, ammunition, food, water, nothing else. They rolled out of FOB Helmand in a beat-up Toyota Hilux that looked like every other civilian vehicle in Afghanistan. No unit markings, no radio, no backup, just Sarah, Reaper, and enough weapons to fight a small war hidden under a tarp in the truck bed. "Rodriguez thinks we're on a reconnaissance patrol," Reaper said, navigating through the pre-dawn darkness. "Won't realize we're gone until the scheduled check-in at 0800. That gives us 4 hours before Vance knows we ran." The road stretched out ahead of them, empty and dangerous. They made it 40 kilometers before the first checkpoint. Afghan National Army, supposedly friendly. 3 soldiers in mismatched uniforms, smoking cigarettes and looking bored. One of them waved them to a stop. Reaper handed over forged documents and a stack of Afghan currency. The soldier counted the money, nodded, waved them through. They made it another 60 kilometers before the ambush. It came from a grape field on the right side of the road. Sarah saw the muzzle flashes half a second before she heard the crack of AK-47 fire. Rounds punched through the truck's windshield, spider-webbing the glass, missing Reaper's head by inches. "Contact right!" Sarah was already moving, rolling out of the passenger door, hitting the dirt, bringing her M4 up. She saw 4 fighters, maybe 5, poorly trained but enthusiastic. Taliban, probably, or bandits. Didn't matter which. Reaper floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, engines screaming, more rounds sparking off the frame. Sarah ran alongside, using the vehicle for cover, returning fire in controlled bursts. Saw 1 fighter drop, then another. The truck hit a pothole and nearly flipped. Reaper fought the wheel, got it under control, kept moving. Sarah jumped into the bed, pulled the tarp off the weapons cache, grabbed her father's Remington 700. "Keep driving," she shouted. Through the scope, the world became clear. 400 meters back, she could see the ambush team regrouping. Could see them mounting a technical truck, preparing to pursue. Could see the driver climbing into the cab, the machine gunner settling behind a PKM. Sarah took a breath, let it out, squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The driver's head snapped back. The technical truck swerved, crashed into a ditch. The surviving fighters scattered. 20 kilometers later, Reaper pulled over. The windshield was destroyed. 1 tire was shredded. The engine was leaking something that might have been oil or coolant or transmission fluid. "We're not making it to Kabul in this," he said. "Then we walk." They abandoned the truck, took what they could carry, weapons, ammunition, water, the satellite phone, started walking east toward Kabul, across terrain that had killed better-equipped soldiers than them. The first day they covered 40 kilometers. The second day they ran out of water, found a stream that was probably contaminated, drank it anyway because dying of thirst was certain, and dying of dysentery was only probable. The third day, Reaper's sat phone buzzed. He looked at the message, showed it to Sarah. "Rodriguez says Vance has issued an alert. 2 AWOL personnel, armed and dangerous, possibly compromised by enemy propaganda. Shoot on sight orders." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Our own military is hunting us." "Not all of them, just the ones Vance controls." Reaper deleted the message. "Makes it easier in a way. Now we know everyone's an enemy until proven otherwise." That night they sheltered in a cave that smelled like goat shit and old death. Sarah cleaned her weapons while Reaper kept watch. Neither of them slept much. "Tell me about your father," Reaper said. "Not the soldier, the man. What was he like?" Sarah thought about it. Quiet, patient. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper. But you could tell when he was disappointed. It was worse than being yelled at. He had standards, you know? Expected you to live up to them. Expected you to be better than you thought you could be. Sounds like a hard ass. He was. But he was also the kind of man who'd spend 6 hours teaching a 12-year-old girl how to calculate windage and elevation. Who'd sit on the porch and explain why honor mattered more than victory. Who'd tell you that being strong meant protecting people weaker than you. Sarah's voice cracked. He didn't deserve what they did to him. No one deserves that. But we're going to make it right. Your father collected this evidence, knowing it would probably get him killed. Least we can do is make sure he didn't die for nothing. They reached the outskirts of Kabul on the 4th day, exhausted, filthy, down to their last magazines. The city sprawled before them, a maze of concrete and corruption where you could disappear or die depending on who you knew and how much you could pay. CIA Safe House is in the Wazir Akbar Khan district, Reaper said. Diplomatic quarter, heavy security but also heavy surveillance. Vance will have people watching. Then we don't go to the safe house. We find another way to get the evidence out. Sarah pulled up the phone's file directory, found an encrypted folder she hadn't noticed before. Opened it. Dad's notes. He mentions a Delta operator, says, Chen found additional evidence. Chemical weapons transfers 2010 to 2011. Vance still active. Chen building case. Jesus Christ, Bishop's brother was investigating the same conspiracy, which means he didn't die in an IED attack. He was murdered. Same as Dad. Same as Khalil. Sarah's hands were shaking. And Bishop doesn't know. He thinks his brother died in combat. Doesn't know he was assassinated by his own command. We need to get this to Bishop. He deserves to know the truth. And if David Chen collected evidence, Bishop might know where it is. They found an internet cafe in a market district, the kind of place where nobody asked questions as long as you paid cash. Reaper sent an encrypted message to Bishop's personal email. Your brother knew. Evidence hidden. Trust Mitchell. R. 2 days later, Bishop responded, David gave me a key before he died. Said if anything happened to him, use it. Locker 247, Ramstein Air Base, Germany. Didn't know what he meant. Now I do. Getting there tomorrow. We'll extract contents and forward. Watch your backs. They're looking for you everywhere. Sarah felt something like hope for the first time in days. We're going to win this. We're actually going to expose Vance and everyone else involved. Maybe, or maybe we're going to die trying. Reaper checked his weapon. Either way, we're committed now. No going back. That night, Sarah dreamed of her father. He was standing on the ridge overlooking their ranch, rifle in hand, looking at something she couldn't see. You did good, Sar, he said without turning around. Proud of you. Dad, Don't apologize. You did what had to be done. Finished what I started. That's all any soldier can ask for. He turned then, and Sarah saw his face. Younger than she remembered, healthier. The way he'd looked before the cancer that wasn't cancer had hollowed him out. But it's not over yet. Vance knows you have the evidence. He's coming for you. And he's bringing everything he has. Sarah woke to the sound of helicopters. Not the friendly whump whump of Blackhawks, the higher-pitched scream of little birds, the kind special operations used for direct action raids, the kind that carried contractors and assassins and men who killed for money instead of country. Reaper! She was up, grabbing weapons, shouting, We've got company! The first explosion took out the building next door. Shaped charge, precise, professional. The second explosion came 30 seconds later, blowing in the door of their room. Sarah was already diving through the window, hitting the street 3 stories down, rolling with the impact the way she'd learned in airborne school. Reaper came through a second later. They ran. The street was chaos, civilians screaming, contractors in civilian clothes with military-grade weapons flooding the area. Sarah counted 8, maybe 10. All of them focused on the building they just escaped. This way! Reaper pulled her into an alley. They ran through the maze of Kabul's back streets, contractors pursuing, rounds sparking off walls. Sarah returned fire blind, just trying to slow them down, buy time. They emerged into a market square. Hundreds of people, dense crowd, perfect place to disappear. Sarah and Reaper split up, agreed to meet at a predetermined rally point, melted into the chaos. Sarah dumped her tactical vest in a trash pile, threw a headscarf over her hair, became just another woman in the market, anonymous, invisible. Watched through shop windows as contractors searched the crowd, frustration evident on their faces. She made it 3 blocks before she saw General Richard Vance. He was standing beside an armored SUV, satellite phone to his ear, directing the search. 58 years old, gray at the temples, 4 stars on his Army combat uniform. The same man who'd stood next to her father 30 years ago. The same man who'd ordered his death. The same man who was now trying to kill his daughter. Sarah's hand went to her rifle. Still had it slung under a long coat. Could take the shot. 300 meters. Crowded street. Difficult but not impossible. She could end this right now. Her father's voice. A guardian angel with a rifle can change the world if she's willing to pull the trigger. But also, every life is valuable, even our enemies. The moment we forget that, we become what we fight against. Sarah lowered the rifle. Started recording with the satellite phone instead. Got clear video of Vance directing contractors. Got audio of him saying, "I want Mitchell and Morrison dead. I don't care how. Make it look like Taliban if you can. If not, don't leave bodies." Evidence, real, undeniable, recorded evidence of a general ordering the murder of U.S. military personnel. Sarah sent the video to Bishop, sent it to Rodriguez, sent it to 3 different news organizations, uploaded it to encrypted servers, made sure that even if she died in the next 5 minutes, the truth would survive. Then she ran. She met Reaper at the rally point, a bombed-out building on the edge of the city. He was bleeding from a dozen small cuts, favoring his right leg, but alive. "Got separated," he said. "Had to shoot my way out. Think I killed 2 of them, maybe 3. I saw Vance, recorded him ordering our execution, sent it everywhere I could think of." Reaper smiled. Actually smiled. "Then we won. Even if we die now, we won. The evidence is out there. Can't be buried. Can't be denied. We're not dying. Not yet." Sarah pulled out the satellite phone. "Bishop says he got David's evidence. Court-martial level documentation. Names, dates, transactions. Everything we need to put Vance away for life. He's uploading it to military justice servers in Germany. 2 hours until it hits the Inspector General's desk. 2 hours. We just have to survive 2 hours." They made it to the U.S. Embassy. Not inside, that would have been suicide with Vance's connections, but close enough to be in the security perimeter. Close enough that killing them would require explaining to the State Department why a general was conducting military operations inside a diplomatic zone. 1 hour. Contractors probed the perimeter, testing, looking for opportunities. Sarah and Reaper held position in a building overlooking the embassy, weapons ready, waiting. 45 minutes. Sarah's phone buzzed. Message from Rodriguez. "Inspector General has the evidence. FBI is involved. DOJ is involved. Arrest warrants being prepared. Hold your position. Help is coming." 30 minutes. The contractors pulled back. Sarah watched through her scope as Vance got into his SUV. Watched him make a phone call. Watched him realize that it was over. That 30 years of conspiracy were about to come crashing down. Watched him pull out a pistol. "No," Sarah whispered. "Don't you dare take the easy way out." But Vance wasn't pointing the gun at himself. He was pointing it at his sat phone. Destroying evidence. Making sure that even if everything else came out, his direct involvement stayed buried. Sarah made a decision. She took aim with her father's Remington 700. 1,100 meters, Slight crosswind, steep angle, the kind of shot that had made her father a legend. The kind of shot he'd taught her to make. She breathed, squeezed between heartbeats, sent the round downrange with a prayer and a promise. The bullet hit Vance's sat phone dead center, shattered it, sent pieces flying. Vance dropped the pistol, clutching his hand where fragments had cut him. Looked up at the building where Sarah was hidden, 1,100 meters away, and understood. Understood that James Mitchell's daughter had just made an impossible shot. Understood that she could have killed him, but chose mercy. Understood that sometimes the most devastating thing you could do to an enemy wasn't take their life, but force them to face justice. 15 minutes. Blackhawks appeared over Kabul. Real ones this time. U.S. military, proper markings, carrying MPS and CID investigators. Sarah watched through her scope as they landed at the embassy. Watched as General Richard Vance was placed in handcuffs. Watched as 30 years of lies finally met the truth. "It's over," Reaper said quietly. "Your father can rest now." Sarah lowered the rifle. "No, this is just the beginning." Dad exposed Vance, but there were others. Officers who knew. Officials who helped. A whole network of corruption that needs to be burned out. "That's not your job, Mitchell. You're a combat medic. Let the investigators handle it." "I'm James Mitchell's daughter. This is exactly my job." 3 days later, Sarah stood in Arlington National Cemetery. They'd changed her father's headstone. No more lies about training accidents. Now it read, "Master Sergeant James Mitchell, U.S. Army Rangers, died in service to truth and honor. A guardian angel who never stopped fighting." Bishop was there, on crutches, healing but alive. "My brother's headstone is getting changed too. They're awarding him the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously for his investigation into the weapons conspiracy, for trying to do the right thing even though it got him killed." "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "Sorry you had to learn the truth this way." "Don't be. At least now I know he didn't die for nothing, that his work mattered." Bishop looked at her. "What are you going to do now? You're famous. The medic who brought down a general. They're talking about medals, Silver Star, maybe even Medal of Honor." Sarah looked at her father's grave. "I'm going to finish what he started. Vance is arrested, but there are others. The network goes deep. Someone has to root it out. You, me, and anyone else who remembers what honor means." 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood on a ridge in Afghanistan, Barrett M82.50 caliber rifle across her shoulders. Below her, a SEAL team prepared to raid a compound. Different team, different mission, same war. But Sarah wasn't a medic anymore, not officially. She was something else now, something the Army didn't have a name for but desperately needed. An operator who could kill when necessary, but preferred to heal. A sniper who understood the value of life because she devoted years to preserving it. A woman who carried her father's legacy not as a burden, but as a promise. Her radio crackled. "Angel, this is ground team. Ready for Overwatch." Angel. They'd made it official. Her call sign, her identity. Sarah Angel Mitchell. Combat medic. Sniper. The woman who'd brought down a general and survived to tell about it. "Copy, ground team. Angel has eyes on. 8 tangos visible. 3 on patrol. 5 static. You're clear to proceed." The team moved. Sarah watched through her scope, ready to protect them, ready to save them if they got hurt, ready to kill anyone who tried to harm them. Because that's what a guardian angel did. Protected the innocent, punished the guilty, made impossible shots seem easy because someone had taught her well, and she'd refused to quit. Her father's voice in her head. "Proud of you, Sarah." Sarah smiled, adjusted her scope, watched her team move through the compound with the precision of professionals. Watched them extract the target without firing a shot. Watched them exfiltrate clean. Perfect operation. No casualties, no drama, just good soldiers doing difficult work in impossible conditions. The way it was supposed to be. the way her father had taught her. "Ground team, this is Angel. Target secured. You're clear to RTB. Good work down there." "Copy, Angel. You keeping us safe up there?" Sarah looked at her rifle, at the Barrett M82 that could punch through engine blocks at 1.5 miles, at the medical bag she still carried, still used, still needed, at the two parts of herself that had finally found balance. "Always," she said. "That's what angels do." The sun set over Afghanistan, painting the mountains in shades of gold and blood. Sarah packed her weapon, checked her medical supplies, prepared for the helicopter ride back to base. Another mission complete, another day survived, another chance to honor the man who taught her that strength came in many forms, and the strongest people were those who knew when to fight and when to heal. She was James Mitchell's daughter, combat medic, sniper, guardian angel, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Protecting the innocent, honoring the dead, making sure that lies stayed buried and truth kept breathing. One shot at a time, one life at a time, one mission at a time, forever. The Black Hawk lifted off into the Afghan night, carrying Sarah home, carrying her toward the future her father had prepared her for without her knowing, carrying her into the life she'd earned through blood and sacrifice, and the refusal to quit when everyone said she should. They'd called her just a medic once, thought she couldn't keep up, thought she was a liability, left her in Crossfire and expected her to die. She'd proved them wrong with 11 shots and a borrowed rifle. Now they called her Angel. And when the call came, when soldiers needed saving, or enemies needed stopping, or impossible shots needed making, she answered. Because that's what angels did. And Sarah Mitchell was the best guardian angel the U.S. military had ever seen. Her father would have been proud. Hell, he probably was, watching from wherever soldiers went when their wars finally ended. Watching his daughter carry on the fight, watching her make the impossible possible, watching her prove that sometimes the smallest person in the room was the most dangerous, because she knew exactly how precious life was, and exactly when to take it.